Welcome everybody. ELA, Mr. Balker, doing Amplify. I got great news for you. We're starting a whole new unit, and this is, I don't know if it's my favorite one. It might be my second favorite one. It's real close, but it's a whole new thing. So here's what we're doing. It's 8A subunit 3, and we're gonna do lesson number 1. This unit is going solo. What's going solo, you ask? I'm glad you asked. Going solo is an autobiography of Roald Dahl who is traveling and ends up in the middle of a giant war. It's fantastic. Here's the important things to know about it. First of all, Roald Dahl wrote this story when he was 70 years old. But he lived this story when he was like 20, okay? He was a young man. And so he's got all of the years of experience of writing to kind of retell this story, but it's a really fun story. And some of the things that he went through are really interesting. I think you guys are gonna really enjoy it. I know that the class last year certainly did. So we're gonna go ahead and go through it. If you wanna download the text, you certainly can. You don't have to, but let's go ahead and go to slide 3, talking about the opening information. As always, I really recommend that you hit the play button, even if you like to read it yourself. Hit the play button because sometimes the voices are sort of cool. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go ahead and read this very first beginning right here. You see the little picture of the speaker? All you have to do is hit play. It tells you this is gonna take 55 seconds.
The ship that was carrying me away from England to Africa in the autumn of 1938 was called the SS Mantola. She was an old paint-peeling tub of 9,000 tons, with a single tall funnel and a vibrating engine that rattled the teacups in their saucers on the dining room table. The voyage from the port of London to Mombasa would take 2 weeks, and on the way, we were going to call in at Marseille, Malta, Port Said, Suez, Port Sudan, and Aden. Nowadays, you can fly to Mombasa in a few hours, and you stop nowhere, and nothing is fabulous anymore. But in 1938, a journey like that was full of stepping stones, and East Africa was a long way from home. Especially if your contract with the Shell company said that you were to stay out there for 3 years at a stretch. I was 22 when I left. I would be 25 before I saw my family again.
Okay, as I told you earlier, he wrote this when he was 70 years old. The events take place between 1938 and 1941, right before and in the middle of World War II, okay? He was in his 20s. I can't imagine this kind of an adventure. I mean, I really can't. When you think about how far everything is away, this guy's getting on a boat, an objectively not fancy boat, to go all the way from Great Britain, all the way to Africa. And he's not gonna see his family for years. We wouldn't even consider stuff like that now, right? You take a quick flight, you get there in a few hours, great. Oh, yeah, maybe I'll go home for Thanksgiving, maybe I'll go home for Christmas. That's not how it was back then. He's gonna be gone, completely cut off, away from everybody. It's hard to imagine doing that, but what an adventure. Imagine how much that's gonna shape you as a person. I think it's fantastic. Go ahead and finish that. Okay, now that we're finished with that, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The next slide is number 4. And it specifically says, use the text as a referee to paraphrase. I want to explain to you paraphrasing, because paraphrasing is tough. Here's what a paraphrase is trying to do. You want to read what somebody else wrote, and you want to condense it, reword it, translate it, make it more approachable for yourself, another audience, whatever it is. Paraphrasing is a very valuable skill. Okay? The difference between paraphrasing and plagiarizing or repeating is that you change it a little bit. You make it a little bit your own. And so that's what we need to do here, is we want to go through this section and we want to paraphrase and change what he said to make it our own. But we don't want to take anything away from it. So here's the little bit that they've got for us to paraphrase. And look, I'm going to tell you, this is the hardest part of the assignment. Learning to paraphrase well is tough. It's a skill, though, that we use in this class a lot. Nowadays you can fly to Mombasa in a few hours and you stop nowhere and nothing is fabulous anymore. But in 1938, a journey like that was full of stepping stones, and East Africa was a long way from home. That is a really strong couple of sentences there, guys. What he's saying is that nowadays things are different. You could just jump on a quick plane and be there in no time. But back then, everything had so much complication to it. There's these places you had to go. And compared to it, nothing's fabulous like that anymore. Nothing's crazy and wild and interesting. That was an adventure. Nowadays, it's easy and convenient. That would be my paraphrase, okay? I want you to do the same thing. Put it in your language. Put it into something that makes sense to you. What he's trying to say in this whole passage is that things are just so different. You know, now that he's 70 years old, it's completely different than when he was a kid. Because back then, things were just challenging and interesting and fun. So that's your first big assignment, is fill that out right here. We're going to go into specific words. Okay, now that we're finished with that, we want to go into the next thing, talking about specific words. What are specific words? Well, they have chosen some really specific words in this section to highlight ideas. Nowadays is an interesting word choice, because you could just say now, currently. This gives it a casual, approachable feel. And he does this a lot. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is and, but, and right here. It ties everything together, but it ties things together that don't make sense. Okay? You can fly to Mombasa in a few hours and you stop nowhere. What? And you stop nowhere. It should be but you stop nowhere. But he chose and on purpose to highlight that, hey, it didn't used to be like that. It used to be better. Does that make sense? So, those are some words that they've chosen that are very specific and very intentional, okay? I want to go very quickly. Okay, so now we go to number 5. Number 5 is kind of giving us an idea of what's going to happen. When we talk about what's going on in this little story of Little Red Riding Hood, they've highlighted this section down here. Make sure to keep to the path, right? They're alluding at that point that if you don't keep to the path, bad things might happen. Well, we know what happens in Little Red Riding Hood, right? She encounters a rather unfortunate large dog. It's a wolf, I know. So what they're doing there is giving us an idea of what to expect. What do we think is going to happen based upon this little line right here? Stay on the path. Well, we know she's not going to stay on the path. That's why they mention it. The same thing is true right here in the voyage out. So your assignment, very easily, is to choose a sentence, a phrase in this section that you think gives you an idea of what's going to happen. And then write what it tells us about Roald's perspective, how he feels, what he thinks. Is he excited? Is he terrified? How does he feel about the things that are going to happen to him in this situation? And pick just one sentence. That's it. That's all you have to do in this entire lesson. So knock those 2 things out, and I will see you guys for the next one. Thank you so much for joining.